Christmas smelled like cinnamon and bleach that year. My mother, always scrubbed before holidays, as if the sting of chemicals could scar memory off the walls, as if guests wouldn't notice the way fear lived in the corners. James stood beside me on the front step, holding a bottle of wine and a stupidly hopeful smile, and for half a breath I believed him when he whispered, "It'll be okay, they'll see how happy we are." I wanted to believe anything soft and ordinary. I wanted to believe in a version of the night that didn't end with sirens. Elena opened the door and flinched at the cold. Her smile was thin, stretched tight over something that hurt. Her hair hung dull around her face and there was concealer crusted under one eye, where a bruise bloomed green and yellow like rotten fruit. She tugged the sleeve of her sweater down over her wrist, so quickly I almost missed it. James noticed the same things I did. I felt his breath hitch and his hand press the small of my back like a secret vow. "Oh my gosh, Mia," Elena gasped, too brightly. "You're emasculating him in public. He's supposed to help you out of your coat, not the other way around." She laughed like a ringtone. James smiled and offered his hand and introduced himself. And for a second I saw the shape of the life we were building, a man who listened when I talked, who planned dates and texted me reminders to drink water, who never once made my success feel like a spotlight he had to drag away. He told my mother he was proud of my promotion before I could stop him. The transformation was instant. My mother's face went from hostess, smile to something feral, something that remembered how to snarl. "A real man doesn't let his woman outshine him," she said, every syllable bitten off as if she were chewing gristle. Her hand shot forward and grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave crescent moons. That's when she saw the ring. I didn't even have time to pull back. The sound she made wasn't language, not really. It was the sound of a match striking. "You feminist bitch," she hissed, louder now, for the room, for the world. "You've destroyed everything I taught you." She wrenched my hand toward her, fingers digging into my swollen knuckle and yanked. The band cut into my skin like wire. Elena was suddenly behind me, hands clamping my shoulders, whispering something I couldn't hear over the rush of blood in my ears. My finger turned purple at the base, a tight throb that made my vision strobe at the edges. "Mom, stop." James grabbed for my arm, for hers, for anything, but my mother had always been stronger than she looked. She twisted harder, and the pain flared white. I heard myself scream like someone far away. The room tilted. Someone's chair scraped the tile. My father wasn't in the room. He hadn't been the room in years unless the TV told him to be. James's voice came through the fog. Calm, trained, a man dialing 911 while keeping his body between me and the knife block. "Ma'am," he said, because that's how he is, polite even to a storm. "Let go of her hand, please." Let go. He might as well have asked the ocean not to drown. "You destroyed my daughter." My mother screamed at him, spittle bright on her lips, and grabbed for a knife, a big kitchen one with a black handle, and lunged. James stepped to meet her. The world went loud and then too quiet. A corner of my brain counted the seconds since I'd last breathed. The sirens wore blue coats and clean boots and measured voices. By the time the paramedics gave me a blanket and checked the bone, my finger was dislocated and the skin at the base was split where the ring had tried to stay. The metal was slick with my own blood. Elena's hands shook. My mother shook too, but with triumph, the way she always did when chaos curled up and purred in her lap. 8 months is enough time for scars to turn from savage red to something you can hide with a drugstore bandage. It's enough time for silence to grow mold in the cracks of a family. This morning, my phone lit up with her name. I watched it buzz across the counter, watched sunlight catch the edge of the screen. I let it ring until there was nothing left to ring. Then I listened to her message because some wounds like to pick themselves. "Maya," she said, voice tiny, wounded, the way she gets when there's an audience, even if it's just her imagining one. "Baby, I didn't mean it. It was Christmas." Emotions were high. "Please, let me take it back." People like my mother don't take things back. They reload. Blocking her number felt like carving a door into a stone wall and walking through it. I blocked Elena too, and my aunt who likes to send Bible verses like poison chocolates, and a cousin who always just wanted to check in, so she could pad a story with witness names. James changed my passwords. We made new emails. I stared at old photos and deleted them one by one. Each deletion a small funeral for a girl who had practiced saying, "Whatever you think is best, honey," until the words made her throat taste like pennies. Work became a refuge, then a battleground. Thursday morning, my boss, another woman named McCatherine who wore precision like perfume, called me into her office and folded her hands like someone about to deliver moderate but treatable news. "I received a concerning call," she said. "Your mother claims you stole family heirlooms. She also suggests you might be having mental health challenges. She implies your fiancé is controlling." I pulled up the police report with the photo of my bandaged hand. The way relief moved over my boss's face made me want to cry with gratitude and vomit with shame. She believed me. But belief has paperwork. She's called 3 times. My boss said gently. We can handle it. But there's your promotion next week. Optics matter to the board. I left her office steady, even though I felt like my bones were vibrating. James was waiting downstairs with my favorite sandwich and a lid he'd wiped clean for me because he knows I hate coffee lids that taste like dust. How bad? He asked. I told him. His jaw did the clench that makes a little muscle jump. Harassment charges, he said. Today. Ashley will help. Ashley is his middle sister, a lawyer with hair like a thunderstorm and a laugh like a dare. She set us at her kitchen table with a recorder and a stack of forms and said, "Document everything. Think like a prosecutor. Time? Date. What was said? Who else heard it?" The pile of paper became a history of small violences and big ones: the ring, the knife, the calls to my job, the wellness checks. The time my mother told Mrs. Chen across the hall that James was kidnapping me and Mrs. Chen watched us with pity from behind her peephole. Saturday morning, the police knocked so hard a picture fell. "We have a report you're being held against your will," said the older one with a careful voice. "Your mother's concerned." I showed them the report, the restraining order we had filed, the photos. The younger officer sighed. "Third one this week." He muttered to his boots. Family drama disguised as crime. After they left, I shook so hard the mug rattled in my hand. James wrapped me in his grandmother's scratchy blanket. "Tei," he said, and breathing, like spells. The calls at work multiplied like fruit flies. My mother accused me of embezzlement to accounting, of dealing to security, of data theft to our biggest client. I heard the word, promotion. Go soft and then go away. My mother also called the high school friend who cut my hair for 6 years and told her I'd joined a cult. She called a cousin who works at City Hall and learned the date of our courthouse wedding. "We can change it," James said. The clerk shrugged. "She'll just find the new one." Ashley said, "Let her. Security will be ready, and judges love when the bad guys show up in costume." It was brutal to call my mother a bad guy out loud. It was also correct. We scaled the wedding down until it felt like a heartbeat instead of a parade. James's parents and sisters, a judge with kind hands, rings we slid back onto my healed finger as if writing the opposite of December. We arrived early. The courthouse smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. My palm was damp in James's, and his thumb drew small circles like a slow song. For 20 minutes we were just two people, in love waiting for their turn. For 20 minutes I let myself be a woman, not a case file. The doors crashed open like a storm. My mother in her church dress, Elena hovering behind her, and a man with soft hands and a soft jaw, who I later learned was Derek's brother, Brandon, all rehearsed and righteous. "Stop this blasphemy right now," my mother's voice echoed, enjoying the acoustics. Security converged, but she cut a path with the authority of a woman who has always been allowed to ruin a room. Her nails bit through my sleeve. "Mia baby." She cooed to me and shouted to everyone else, "This isn't you. This man has poisoned you. Brandon will forgive you. He knows how to handle a strong, wild woman. Let go of her," James said, soft like a knife laid on a table. She told him to shut his mouth and measure his manhood. Security pried her away, her voice high with biblical fury: feminism, cults, the end of the world. The judge, trying not to look like he was rolling his eyes, asked, "Would you like a moment?" I said, "No, Your Honor, we'd like to get married." We did. It was perfect because it was ours. When the judge said the words, I let the past drop out the bottom of me like a trapdoor and fell into a different sky. In the lobby, Ashley's phone sang. "Power of attorney?" she said, mouth flattened. "She just filed to become your guardian. Claims you're incompetent due to ideological contamination." I laughed because there wasn't any air left for crying. "Okay," I said. "She wants a fight, she can have one." The next weeks were a smear of filing and affidavits, of therapists and HR departments and security footage turned into exhibits. My boss confirmed the $1 million client she'd watched walk away after my mother's performance. Mrs. Richardson down the hall testified about my mother's tearful warnings, the way she pressed childhood photos into trembling hands. The court granted a temporary restraining order and stamped it with ink that smelled like new tires. My mother responded by sending Alina as her messenger and Brandon as her shadow. He happened to be at the coffee shop where James and I went every morning. He was in the canned beans aisle when we reached for pasta. He sat on park benches like a bad idea waiting to be picked up. Ashley said, "Document, document, document." He's dancing on the line. The judge will hate it. At work, security started screening calls. My mother's voice became a code red. She did not stop. She called my boss's boss and told her I was pregnant with another man's baby. She called my old internship supervisor and claimed I had stolen laptops. She filled my inbox with replies to job applications I had never sent to clubs I had never set foot in, and IT traced them to the IP address at my childhood home. I opened my email and found the sent folder dense with resignation letters I hadn't written, fall messages to clients with my name in the signature. It was like seeing your handwriting on a ransom note for your own life. The pretrial hearing was a circus. My mother arrived with her church women in matching shawls the color of unripe fruit. Elena sat with them, then drifted to the aisle and picked a seat closer to me, like a tide-changing opinion. The judge asked for order. My mother talked about demons. Ashley talked about evidence. The judge extended the restraining order to 2 years and recommended my mother seek therapy. She said she didn't need it. Demons did. Elena called that night crying and sober. Derek left me, she said. He said the drama made him look bad at work. He was fired. Because of Mom. I asked. The silence after my question was the sound of truth deflating. She called his boss. 17 times. Elena whispered. She thought she was helping. It was like watching someone finally remove a splinter that had splintered into more splinters. It's not too late, I said. Come with me to therapy. She said. I don't know how to be anything else. I said. Well, learn. We planned a tiny honeymoon at a cabin 2 hours north, the kind of place where the air smells like pine chew, and the stars look close enough to bruise. We lasted one night before the police knocked, hands on holsters, voices careful. Kidnapping report, they said. A woman named Mia being held against her will. We separated for interviews on our wedding trip, the cabin's porch light making halos of moths while I repeated the litany, I'm fine. We're married. Here are our documents. Here is our restraining order. Here, officer, is the open wound where a mother goes when she wants to feel God. When we got home, the apartment door was ajar, the kind of thing your gut notices before your eyes do. James put an arm across my stomach and pushed me behind him. Inside, the destruction was a thesis. Every piece of professional clothing I owned was shredded, precise as surgery. My blouses like confetti. My suits slit along the seams like someone performing a petty autopsy. Bible verses were taped to each ruin, about obedience, submission, women being silent. On the mirror, scrawled in lipstick, the sentence every child dreads because it wears a grin of nostalgia. I brought you into this world. I can take you out. The detective photographed everything. The building's camera caught my mother using Elena's old key. My mother was arrested, posted bail, and later stood in court in a black dress and a mask of innocence. Her church ladies dabbed their eyes. Brandon watched me like he was measuring whether I'd look better in a cage. Elena sat with me, hands folded, chin up. Ashley looked like a blade. The trial pressed evidence into shape. The Christmas assault, the knife, the workplace harassment that bled a contract dry in front of my boss's eyes. The false police reports that turned our honeymoon into an interrogation. The break-in and the wardrobe massacre. The identity theft. The emails. The judge heard it all and kept asking for quiet, like quiet was something he could order into existence. My mother's lawyer painted her as a mother whose love had grown wild and strangling. They called women from her church who said she was devoted and traditional and misunderstood by this modern world. The prosecutor called Elena. She spoke about books on heads and trays of water and practicing sentences like I'm sorry for speaking out of turn until the apology eroded her tongue. She told the jury about Derek and the 17 calls, how my mother helped him into unemployment and blamed Elena for the fallout. The defense tried to say Elena was manipulated by me. Elena looked at me like a sister and then back at the lawyer like a mirror and said, no, I finally manipulated myself into the truth. When it was my turn, I talked about the ring and the knife and the bleachy smell of Christmas. I talked about phones lighting up like sirens. I held up a photo of my graduation dress, the one my mother hadn't attended, now shredded like a message. The defense asked if I'd chosen career over family. I said, I chose not to be hit. I chose not to be controlled. They asked if I'd refused men my mother approved of. I said, my mother approves of men who approve of cages. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. We sat in a small room with coffee that tasted like burned bread and waited. James's hand never left mine. Ashley made lists. Elena stared at the table and occasionally flinched like a phantom hand had slapped her. When the bailiff said the jury had a verdict, sound went thin and far away. Guilty on all counts, the foreman said, and the words built a new shape in my chest. The sentences stacked like bricks: time for harassment, for identity theft, for the break-in, for the death threat. Restitution. A 10-year restraining order after release. My mother looked at me as if I'd set the fire she'd been fueling for years. She didn't cry. She doesn't believe sadness unless she can perform it. They led her away. Her church group melted into beige quietly, like a mistake absorbing itself. Brandon settled close enough to say, this isn't over. Someone needs to continue her work. Ashley stepped between us like a wall. Repeat that into my camera, she said, and he backed off, grin crack. The weeks after looked like a life trying to remember how to be a life. Elena moved into our place while she got steady, therapy twice a week, meetings with women who used to believe pain meant love. Some days she paced like a caged animal, furious that we had been trained the way puppies are trained, with treats and smacks. Some days she curled into me on the couch and we watched cartoons because the world was too sharp. Some days she said, I don't know how to be a person who doesn't ask permission to breathe. And I said, me neither. Let's learn together. A work stopped whispering. My boss became a human again instead of a judge. The promotion was gone, but a different door opened at a smaller firm where my reputation didn't arrive 3 steps before me wearing a mask my mother had cut. James's parents started Sunday dinners, the table filled with the kind of noise that doesn't bruise. We built rituals so ordinary they felt like spells, the grocery list on the fridge, the shoes lined up by the door, the way James hums when he's chopping onions, the scarf Elena always forgets and we pretend to steal. 6 months into my mother's sentence, I got a letter on cheap paper from a place that smells like disinfectant and defeat. It was scripture and shrapnel and a refusal to say my name without attaching the word daughter, like a leash. I read it twice. I burned it in the sink. The smoke smelled like old lipstick. Elena watched the ash collapse and said, consistent to the end. We renewed our vows on our 2nd anniversary in a garden behind a library because words saved me and I wanted them to watch. Alina stood beside me as maid of honor. Her bruise maps had faded, replaced by a kind of clear-eyed softness. James said vows he wrote on scratch paper at the laundromat. Mine were short. I promised to choose myself without choosing against us. We ate cake with forks and laughed when a bee wanted in. No one crashed the ceremony. The loudest thing was joy. Then the notification pinned, parole hearing, release scheduled, conditions strict. She was assigned a halfway house 2 states away. She couldn't legally return to our city for 10 years. Elena spiraled for a week, sleeping with the lamp on, double-checking locks, jumping at the long, lonely ring of the landline in the hallway outside our apartment. The human body remembers danger the way a house remembers fire. But days passed and nothing happened. Weeks, months. We bought a basil plant and didn't kill it. I learned to sleep without memorizing escape routes. Sometimes I see someone with my mother's haircut in the cereal aisle and the floor tilts. Sometimes I wake at 3 a.m. sure of footsteps in the hall. Trauma is a feral cat. Even when you stop feeding it, it still prowls around the porch for a while. But it prowls less now. It slinks away sooner. Elena started classes. Psych 101, then a course on crisis counseling. She came home with a stack of index cards and the first smile that reached her eyes since we were children. I want to help girls who think love looks like their bodies being rearranged to fit someone else's idea, she said. I want to be the person we needed when we were 12. She bought a secondhand kettle and a plant that sheds leaves like confetti and a tiny blue couch that looks exactly like a tiny blue couch. Her apartment smells like laundry and hope. At work, my new boss called me into her office with a sentence I'd stopped expecting. Would like to promote you. She slid the offer letter across the desk and I felt the click in my head where a puzzle piece lives. It didn't fix everything. It didn't have to. It was proof that building is possible after demolition if you have a hammer and people who will hold the ladder. On a Tuesday afternoon heavy with rain, a distant aunt texted from a number I didn't recognize. She's joined a new church. She tells them you're lost to feminism. She prays you'll come back. I stared out the window at a city that kept being a city no matter who prayed at it. I wrote back, let her pray. I didn't add, I'm busy living. The thing about leaving is that the leaving keeps happening. You leave the room. Then the house, then the habit of flinching. You leave the old stories on the side of the road, and you drive until your tank is low, and then you get out and walk, and you keep putting one foot down and then the other until the ground feels less like a trap and more like a place you can stand. One night, washing dishes, James bumped my hip with his and said, remember when you thought happiness was a room you weren't invited into? I laughed and flicked a soup bubble at him. I broke the door, I said. And then I built a different house. Sometimes I still hear my mother's voice in the back of my skull, the way some people hear the ocean when they press a shell to their ear. I'm sorry for speaking out of turn. Whatever you think is best, honey. The phrases echo like a ghost. When they do, I speak out loud on purpose. I say, I disagree. I say, no. I say, I want. The first time I said I want without apologizing, my throat tightened like it didn't know how. Now it opens. Elena asked me once if I thought our mother loved us. I told her the truth I could manage. She loves the idea of us. The idea of obedient daughters, of vases that hold her flowers. The idea of purity like glass, transparency mistaken for virtue. I said, she loved the mirror, not the girls reflected in it. If you ask me to list what's left after a woman like that is carried away in a van with a cage in the back, I will tell you, the sound of your own name without flinching. The taste of coffee in a quiet kitchen where no one is timing your sips. The thick, boned beauty of friendships that don't require performance. A man's warm hand on your back at the DMV, at the bakery, at the sink, not guiding, not claiming, just there. A sister's giggle at midnight because she burned her first attempt at rice and you both eat it anyway. A plant that lives. A calendar without court dates. The astonishment of boredom. On the anniversary of the Christmas that tried to unmake me, James and I decorated a ridiculous tree with cheap lights and paper cranes we folded while watching a terrible movie. Elena came over with store-bought cookies and a story about an old woman in her class who wanted to be a counselor at 62. We toasted with hot chocolate. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and absolutely no bleach. At midnight, my phone buzzed with an unknown number and I let it buzz until it stopped. The silence after didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like a room I could breathe in, and if sometimes I picture a different kitchen, a different holiday, a different version of the woman who raised me reaching out and squeezing my hand and saying, "I did it all wrong." I let the picture float by like a balloon someone else let go of. I don't chase it. I open the window and let it drift. People ask me now and then what I would say to a girl standing at a sink practicing, "I'm sorry for speaking out of turn the way we practice the alphabet." I would tell her, "You are not a classroom for someone else's lesson. You are not a stage for someone else's applause. You are not an altar where someone else's God gets fed." I would tell her, "Say no and mean it, and when they say you'll be alone, tell them you'd rather be alone than swallowed." I would tell her, "There are families that will choose you, and you can choose them back." The last time I saw Elena cry the kind of tears that leave a salt line, it was because she'd passed an exam and didn't know what to do with a world that let her win. We sat on that ridiculous tiny couch and she hiccuped and laughed and said, "Do you ever think about how weird it is to be happy?" I thought about the knife, the ring, the lipstick on glass. I thought about my mother's voice thinned to a thread stretched between states and years, and how even threads can snap with enough time and enough hands holding the other end. I said, "Every day. We don't speak my mother's name. She is not a spell we intend to cast." When the occasional relative forwards a sermon link or a photo of a church picnic 2 states away where she stands at the edge of the frame pretending to be saved, I don't click. I won't give her the audience she trained for. Let her practice her lines in the mirror of a sanctuary that mistook volume for truth. Let her pray to a God who applauds control. I have a different religion now. It has to do with small breakfasts and unremarkable Tuesdays and how James tucks a blanket around Elena when she falls asleep sitting up, because she never quite learned how to trust being horizontal in a world that kept knocking things off shelves. There are scars on my finger where the ring cut in, pale and raised like a memory that refuses to flatten. When I twist the band, it catches a little. I like that it does. It reminds me that joy can coexist with the place a wound used to be. That the body's map reroutes without asking permission from the cartographer who drew the old roads. That I get to decide where I'm going now, who sits in the passenger seat, when to pull over and watch the first fireflies of the season blink, on like the universe remembering how to be kind. And if one day a letter arrives again from a halfway house or a church basement, if it's full of scripture and sharpened nostalgia, I'll do what I did before. I'll light a match. I'll watch the paper curl in on itself like a secret relief to be told. I'll open the window and let the smoke out into a sky that belongs to no one. Then I'll turn back to the stove where water has come to a boil, to the table where Elena is scattering flashcards, to the couch where James is asleep with a book face down on his chest, to the soft and ordinary miracle of the life I claimed the day I said no and yes in the same hour, the day I understood that the door I thought was locked from the outside had always had a latch on my side, and the only thing left to do was reach out and touch it, and step through and keep walking until the air in my lungs belonged to me, and the shape of the future fit the shape of my name, and the next time the past reached for me with hands that smelled like bleach and control, I would smile, and take James's hand, and Elena's hand, and my own, and keep walking until the street curved and the light changed and the world, finally, became large enough to hold the sound of my voice when I said, "I am not yours, I am not yours, I am not yours, I am."